Oh my God. Robby and Bree have gotten in this insane fight. I think Robby is at his breaking point, Adam. I think he's maybe had enough of all the negative straw manning and mischaracterization from Briahna Greyjoy. And wow, he definitely explodes today.
Now, is this real hatred or are they going to make out soon? Because sometimes I wonder, like, what's going on the Rising set there?
I don't know. I mean, I love covering them fighting, and I always feel like Brianna is so much more bad faith when attacking Robby than he is ever remotely towards her. And maybe he's just gotten sick of it.
My view is that it's increasingly difficult for those who would want to discredit the protest to characterize the student protesters themselves as violent when they are being met with such overwhelming violence from the state in the name of keeping peace. What do you make of it?
Look, I think a lot of the video footage we saw over the last couple of days is very bad, is very concerning. I think sending the police after protesters is a very dubious thing to do, given the protests we've seen thus far, not being characterized particularly by violence, being characterized perhaps by violating university policies with respect to if there are encampments for too long in places that they're not allowed to do that. Those are academic matters, and I think dealing with them academically is fine. But yes, wrestling people to the ground, that kind of thing.
Training snipers on them?
Is escalating matters and is not what we want to see, because obviously we must protect the robust tradition of free expression and of protest. Even you don't have to agree with what they're saying. Even if you do characterize the protests as anti-Semitic, that doesn't mean the protests are not allowed to take place. There can only be a police response if there is actual violence. And we have not seen a lot of, you can say you've seen hateful messages or whatever you think you've seen, but have you seen violence? No, you haven't seen a lot of that. So I think what we're hearing from the counter reaction from police and from authority figures saying how to deal with it, I think a lot of what they're calling for is not good. And frankly, I have seen be criticized by some people on the right who are saying, well, wait a minute. If the protests, if these protests result on police being sicked after them, the same thing could happen to our protests. If we're going to have
So you're watching this and you're like, wait a minute, where's the conflict? Where's the fight? Robby's basically laying out what Briahna should agree with completely, right? Like, he's saying that there shouldn't be police going after students. He's saying that they've been too violent. He doesn't seeming to support any of these actions whatsoever. Like, he should be, Briahna should be doing backflips and be overjoyed that Robby's on her side here.
Yeah, he's clearly laying out a position where we don't want to antagonize the protesters too much with police brutality or violence.
Yes. And I think the fact that he's giving so much to her and she still is about to like really stab the knife into his back maybe is what like made him like extra angry. Maybe what's going on. So
I like that little jab she puts in. Oh, they're training snipers on the protesters. Robby, what do you think of that?
Yeah, because there's this thing that's annoying where like when you're talking to someone who's like super politically motivated, ideologically motivated, and it's like unless you give them everything, it's not enough, right? They always think like, oh, you're just mask on. There's some secret. You're just saying things I want to hear before you attack me, before you throw the mask off and reveal that you're like a secret fascist or racist or whatever. But
are there snipers being trained at the protesters? That seems hard for me to believe, but
there was, I think it was in Ohio, where there were police on the roof that had guns at Ohio State University. Now you could say, are they, calling them snipers? Is that fair or not? As they're trying to remove protesters and things of that nature. Obviously to me, I would agree that definitely seems to be excessive. I don't think that's necessary. I believe the Ohio, I don't know if it was the state troopers or the police or whoever, they said that that's just whenever they're dealing with large crowds in order to protect their officers, they just always do that. And they don't make any, different considerations. But obviously I don't think it was necessary. And I agree that it's, the optics of it obviously seem really bad.
Well, I could see having a sniper on hand in case somebody pulls a weapon or something like that. Obviously you want to have, the advantage over them.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if you had people on roofs, and it's a massive crowd, would they be able to effectively, pick out the one person, especially when there hasn't been violence yet on any of these things. So I mean, I don't know. I agree. I think that seems excessive. I don't think you need people on the rooftops with guns, to clear out these protesters who so far have not been violent at all.
Well, look, you wouldn't use them to clear out the protesters. You'd use them in case somebody showed up with a
No,
weapon
I
and got
no, right. I just meant
provocative. Yeah.
right. I meant in like clear out like when the police are coming to clear out people who are protesting in a way that there shouldn't be by either occupying a private property or doing something of that nature. I don't think you need to have people on rooftops with guns. That's all I'm
Right.
saying.
Right. Yeah.
Richie Torres, who you criticize quite a lot by name on this show, him and someone else calling for, he's a Democratic congressman from New York, calling for like an anti-Semitism task force at the national level, I believe, which that idea I was seeing getting mocked by a lot of conservative figures. This is exactly the kind of DEI enshrinement type action that we are fighting against that results in free speech coming under attack. You cannot have the government weeding out people for wrongthink, including for anti-Semitism. If you think there's anti-Semitism, you can criticize it. You can use your free speech to fight it. We don't want the government enshrining into law more protected statuses, more task forces on college campuses. These have all been things that have damaged free speech without making the supposedly marginalized group any safer or better off.
Now, do you agree with that, Sitch?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because like I agree there was this idea about having the anti-Semitic task force, which I agree is insane, completely insane. To have people like this sort of like monitoring thing in colleges. And Robby is completely correct in terms of like it's funny, his position is coming from the principled position of saying, I'm against these DEI things. I'm against this sort of like super we have to, police and make sure that no one is doing anything racist, whatsoever. And I even agree that like a lot of people criticizing about these protests on college campuses, like kind of hyper fixating it as anti-Semitic. It does seem to me to be kind of like people trying to use sort of the left's tools against racism against them in order to get rid of the protest when, I mean, it's not really about that. It should be really, if you're disrupting a private school or a college from being able to be a college for its students, that should not be allowed, regardless of whether they're saying something that's, you perceive as anti-Semitic or not.
Yeah, there's no free speech infraction when you're taking over an area and prohibiting people from using it. That's completely separate. But I do look, it's come up in other videos where there's a kind of a gray area here where people could be perceived as advocating for, physical violence when they're talking about from the river to the sea, stuff like that. They try to have some wiggle room there to say that it's freedom of speech, but it's like advocating for the genocide of a certain of people, then that's not good, right? You're against that.
Of course. Yeah. And that's what's also like why a lot of these college campus protests have changed is because before, if they're just on campus saying ceasefire, stop dropping bombs, it's like, okay, well, then the only infraction would be, are they disrupting classes? Are they disrupting, the use of the property? If they're not, then yeah, go advocate for a ceasefire, whatever. But if you're there and you're like advocating that Israel should be destroyed, which a lot of people seem to be advocating now in these college protests, and are advocating that if you actually support that state of Israel should be able to exist, that you need to be removed from campus or wiped out or something, as one of the guys who was one of the leaders at Columbia was saying, that's when I agree completely. Like, that's when it's like, okay, well, obviously people are not going to feel comfortable on a college campus if they're saying, if you believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist, you should, be killed. Like, that can't be tolerated on campus.
Yeah, but I think Robby would be more in the camp that people can say those kind of incendiary things.
Well, he's far more even libertarian than I am on any of this stuff.
Yeah.
But
to be clear, this is so much more, this is not like a DEI issue.
Oh, so wait, this is important. This is where the breakdown starts. This is where the disaster starts, the slow train wreck, because he equated this to DEI.
Right.
Okay. which I agree with him. And this is sort of like a DI thing, the overly sensitive sort of woke, let's add like anti-Semitism to like the new, like, we have to care about, making sure that no one does a racism on campus thing, right? And that's what kind
Yes.
of sets Briahna off on this path.
Is chanting from the river to the sea, is that a microaggression or is that a
I
macroaggression?
would say that's macro aggression. And I
Right.
agree with you, there is a difference here because obviously, you know, I'm I'm in the position that like, yeah, I don't think people should be allowed to go on campus and say like remove all black people, remove all Jews, right? I don't
Right.
think people should be able to advocate for those things on college campuses. You know, if they want to go stage a protest somewhere where they're allowed to do it, be my guest, but I don't think we should be tolerating that on college campuses. And obviously saying that like from the river to the sea has such a clear indication of wiping out Israel, and people pretending otherwise is just a cope.
Right. But you understand there's enough wiggle room there that people are going to be arguing over it from forever, basically.
Yes.
There's never going to
Yes.
be any resolution on this.
It is, to me, it seems like a troll. Like they obviously know that it pisses people off and they get off on it, and that's why they say it. And it allows them to have this sort of Mott and Bailey wiggle room to be like, "There's not what I meant."
Well, I do think people know that violence is the line. Like advocating for violence is the line. So
Yeah,
they find ways that they can advocate for violence, that there's some kind of plausible deniability that they're
right,
not
exactly,
really advocating for violence. And then they
exactly,
do it the opposite way too, where they want to turn innocuous things into some kind of violence. So therefore you've stepped over the line just by saying something innocuous.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. Yeah,
Issue. This is an effort to deputize basically the ADL to pay for its own censors on campus to administer what it thinks are incidences of anti-Semitism.
That's exactly what we call a DEI issue. But
Well, no. This is not an internal organization making decisions about how it wants to staff itself or have what kind of student body it wants. That's a business. Many of these private universities where these DEI fights have been going down, making independent decisions about how they want to run things. This is a government actor aligning with the ADL, not in the interest of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but specifically to advance a political goal, which is maintaining silence on criticism of Israel.
this is hilarious. Like this clip is amazing.
Yeah,
That
it is.
Brianna is so blind to what's going on here. And Robbie's so correct. This is exactly what DEI is, which is you have, the government or the culture, I guess, in some instances come in and they say, you need to fight some form of racism or bigotry. So you either have to hire a third party, which a lot of these corporations and college campuses do, to come in and write policies or to sort of police what is actually racist, or to do these, what is racist seminars where all the employees have to go in and do all this stuff. And part of the big reason they have to do all this stuff is because if they don't, they will get, it opens themselves up to someone suing them saying, oh, well, the employer, the college, whatever, was racist, against me. And they don't take racism seriously, blah, 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 blah. That's why they're doing this stuff.
Yeah, they're using racism as a cudgel to force people into doing certain things that they want them to do.
Yeah, but it's exactly the same mechanism that like this law would do, where she's complaining like, oh, well, this is different because it's going to be the ADL. Well, yeah, the only difference is it's a different organization. It's not the ADL. It's some other organization that says that they're going to combat racism or sexism or whatever that's doing it. Like Robbie's so correct. It's literally the same thing. And it's so fascinating to me that Briahna, because she doesn't like it, she sees it as completely different.
Well, and the fascinating thing is that it's interesting that she completely recognized it in the situation with the Israel Palestine debate, because
Yes,
she's
yes.
constantly saying, the Jewish people are using anti-Semitism as a way of negating criticism of Israel. Like she
Right,
gets it there. She
right.
totally understands it, makes sense to her. Here, it's completely invisible to her.
Yes, that people, not just Jewish people, but people are using anti-Semitism accusation to not talk about Israel. And it's like same thing with like you're criticizing any sort of like left wing or woke or what DEI policy gets you labeled racist or sexist as a cudgel.
Right.
100% the
Yes.
same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a very different thing. This is not about.
I don't think that's a very different thing.
Okay, well, you don't have to. I'm saying that I think it is, and this is why it's so pernicious, because this is a state-sponsored intervention into a private company, a private industry in the case of most of these private universities, and trying to prevent free speech by the students there and articulating any worldview that is critical of a foreign nation. That is Israel. This is so much bigger. I have my own criticisms of DEI. This is so much bigger and should be treated so much more seriously when you have a foreign state intervening in the ability to have speech in your own country. And be critical of speech of the actions and the funding choices of a government to the tune of billions of dollars.
I don't really want to actually fight about this because we're agreeing on the effect being bad, but many people on the right would say that exactly that kind of intervention is why, like, that corporations and universities didn't just decide DEI sounds great. They got there because it was forced on them by Title IX and Title VI and everything else that came out of civil rights law that required them to police their workplaces for sexism and racism, and then ended up enshrining this tremendous bureaucracy that violates.
Look, if you.
So this is where the fireworks are about to kind of like explode. But we've talked about this issue a lot. And I think I probably do disagree with Robby on this because he's far more libertarian about this stuff than I am. I don't agree that the passing of the original civil rights acts or laws is responsible for what's going on, 60 years later, right? What's going on right now, or 50 years later, what's going on right now? Because obviously there's a huge gap in time before like this kind of ultra woke progressive moral policing came into practice now. So it doesn't make sense to me to say, okay, well, this thing that happened 50 years ago is like a law that got passed 50 years ago was directly responsible. It's like, well, no, people have interpreted the law differently, or now bad actors are using the law negatively now, or maybe, judges over the years have interpreted the law incorrectly, now, whatever. So I do think it's totally fine and totally good for a society and for a government to pass laws that says it is illegal to discriminate against people on the basis of their sex or race or country of origin. I have no problem with that. I 100% agree with that. And obviously, I think you can have laws like that that don't lead us down the pathway of like the hyper woke DI world that we're in now, because we lived in that world for most of the law's existence.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I think laws passed, basically pushing prohibition of racism are a good thing.
Yep.
It's just that being able to label anybody a racist has kind of taken on its own power.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not sure. I mean, perhaps the laws are the origin of it, but it's definitely mutated into something completely different now.
Well, I think the problem is those laws are fine as long as people are operating under the principles and ideas of individual liberalism and individual rights, and saying, okay, we need to be working towards a colorblind society. But then when you have people that are kind of coming from the framework of intersectional Marxism, and they don't believe in liberalism, they don't believe in individual rights, they don't believe in a colorblind society, then they do exactly what you're saying. They mutate these laws, they mutate them and interpret them in ways that are toxic and self-serving to their own political interests.
Right. So much of the DEI woke stuff, I think, is basically trying to label people racist for some sort of tangible advantage, advantage in the workplace or even political advantage. So I don't see how you can put that in the same camp as laws basically against discrimination in the workplace. Like, it's a completely different process that's going on.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what they would say.
If you think laws that say it's illegal to discriminate against Black people and women are the same thing as a law that says you're not allowed to say,
no, we're saying
criticize
that laws
Israel,
that do
then
that.
I don't need to fight with you about that.
We're saying that laws that sound like they're out to do that end up being used to settle political
Robby, you've
scores.
made it really clear that when segregation ended in the 1960s, there should have been no laws that enforced segregation, because that would have been a bad thing. Because
That's not-
So what do you want? Like, you can't have it both ways.
But the people.
We had legal
I can't believe we're
segregation
fighting about
until my
the
parents were kids.
The people saying
my parents were born in a country, in an apartheid state where they did not have equal rights under the law. That ended when they were in elementary school. What was supposed to happen?
I don't
at
see
that
how you
point?
can see that. That is what the ADL is saying that they're doing. That is what the pro-Jewish
what-
groups are saying.
but what
that Jewish lives are at risk unless you have this
Robby,
task force to prevent discrimination against
This is
them.
not- it
That
was
is
not-
what they are saying,
this is
and
what-
it is being used for a
Robby,
bad end that you recognize.
because-
So I don't see why you
because it
can't
was not-
recognize it in all these other circumstances.
Because there were laws on the books.
And we want to get rid of those,
Wait a
and
minute.
there's no disagreement.
In America, it was illegal for black people in half the country to use of public transit.
You don't need to familiarize me.
Apparently I do, because you think that is analogous.
Oh, that's so offensive.
Okay, then be offended. Be offended. Mauled and cry. Be offended. Because what I'm saying is historical truth.
Yeah,
God.
this is bad.
Oh my God.
She's basically, look, she's calling Robby a racist again.
Yes.
Again. Haven't we been down
Yes.
this road before?
We have constantly. It's really wild to me because, like, even though I don't agree exactly with Robby's logic here, I feel like, especially if you're a co-host with someone, they've been doing the show for a while now. I assume that maybe they hate each other behind. I don't know, but I would assume that they would be friends or friendly with each other. And I think you owe it. Now, maybe it wouldn't make for as good YouTube, right? To not have this sort of explosion.
Yeah,
but
I think we should fight more like this.
We
Sitch.
should.
We really should.
We should. But I think it's a better person, a more moral situation that before you accuse your co-host of being like a horrible racist, and then when he explodes on you for the accusation and you tell him to mauled and cry about it
Yeah, totally.
on your video, I think a better way to be like, well, hold on, like, wait a minute. What do you mean? Because it sounds like you're saying this, and this is my position, and you're not saying this, right? Like if one of us says something, we try to like work out exactly what the difference is before making these insane accusations at each other, it just seems so poor taste.
We haven't had a drop down drag out fight in a while, but we've had some, definitely. But
yeah, but even then, it's like it's usually like we're trying to solve it without like just throwing these accusations at each other. It's such bad faith way.
Exactly. And we're trying to solve something. I mean, it is interesting because the difference really is in whether or not it is like there's tangible racism going on, or someone is kind of pretending that there's racism going on for some sort of political advantage, or to label somebody a racist so that they can take them down a peg. That seems to be the distinction here to me.
Right. Or even if they're not pretending, just their own perception is just wrong.
Yeah, that could be the case. That's probably the case here with Brie quite a bit. So so obviously Robby's super offended because he's saying, look, there are all these cases in the world where there's not really tangible racism going on, but they're playing it up for some kind of political advantage, and we should be aware of that. And Briahna is going, but what about all these times when there was real racism going on?
She's saying only the Jews are doing that with Israel, but when it comes to everyone.
I know, that is what is so ironic about this. That is what is so ironic about this. Like, she can see it when it's the people that she wants to take down a peg, right? Who she thinks are trying to play her. Then all of a sudden, it's crystal clear what's going on here. All of this is a farce. This isn't DEI at all.
Yep.
Yeah. It is fascinating. But look, she basically said, look, there are all these instances of real racism in the world, and Robby, you just want to look the other way on them.
Right. Because you're probably racist.
He's like, F you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's like, it's just so annoying because, and I mean, honestly, I don't know how Robby put up with it, because it's like, she's a person who seems to have very little emotional control over herself. She just gets very emotionally invested in these issues and doesn't hear anyone that has any opinion that differs, and just sees red and is just, going out of control and doing all his bad faith, tactics and debate tactics in these conversations with Robby, about these issues. That's terrible.
Yeah, it is terrible. She must have experienced some real racism in her life to be at this place, I would think. That's got to really mess with a person, right?
Of course, that could be the case, but it's like, that's not Robby. Okay. That's not your co-host. I'm assuming that's not Robby. That's not your co-host who's sitting right there next to you, who's trying to have some sort of conversation for you. Like, it's ironic. Briahna has a podcast called the Bad Faith Podcast. Okay.
Right.
And she said that she named it the Bad Faith Podcast in order to sort of like warn, like protect herself from becoming bad faith, I guess. And it's like, oh,
It
well,
didn't
obviously
work.
it didn't work. And she needs to do that because it's constantly what she's doing in these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. So we continuing here?
Yes.
I am not
Wait,
disputing.
Robbie,
I don't want to hear this. I know.
I am offended by the idea that you conflate. I just told you a story about a pro-Israel protester calling out "kill the Jews" that was used as a justification by Northeastern University to clear free speech protesters. Wait a minute, free speech protesters from campus. And that is the kind of thing that I'm guarding against. People who are doing bad faith, weaponized.
I am agreeing with that.
But that is not the same thing as these policies, post-civil rights era policies that are now being stripped away that were intended to correct.
These things are intended for the same reason.
No. De jure segregation was real. De facto legal segregation was a real legal reality that had to be unwound. Point to me the law that discriminates against Jewish people in America today.
No, what I'm saying is that they're using that in bad faith.
Because there was.
So I think the disconnect here is that from Brianna's perspective, she's like, because she's bringing up something that has nothing to do with about like, oh, well, there wasn't systemic racism against Jews, which is irrelevant because Robby's point wasn't that he was saying he was against getting rid. He said he was in favor of getting rid of laws that were racist and were discriminatory against Black people.
Yeah.
Right? What he's saying in his view is that the laws like the civil rights law, which again, I disagree with Robby on this, but he's saying that the laws that were passed with a good intention to fight racism. And yet down the road, they created all these other problems. And he's saying this law to fight anti-Semitism that was proposed, is the same thing. It has some kind of good intention behind it, but it's going to create the same kind of like horrible system down the road. And Briahna doesn't accept that or even understand that because from her view is so set into the position that, well, the people passing the anti-Semitic law are obviously bad actors who just are knowingly don't care about anti-Semitism and are using this because they're all funded by the Israel lobby and they're all just using this to deflect criticism against Israel. Like she doesn't even accept that they're acting from a place where they think that they're stopping anti-Semitism.
Right. Yeah. It's sad. It's so obvious. It's so obvious.
There was a time when there were quotas for Jewish people at school. All of these things were true. And I think it was good and right that.
Well, the ADLU will muster. No, you asked me. The ADLU will muster. But I'm not agreeing with this, but they will come up with a list. Let me finish. They will come up with a list of hate crimes that have been perpetrated against Jewish people that they believe are escalating, and they have some. Now, I have criticized that characterization, and I've said that should not be used to take away people's free speech or due process rights.
What I'm saying
but they will say that there are bad.
What I'm saying is that it's good and right to have structural reforms to get at the structural codified discrimination that existed against Black people and Jewish people. And I'm saying that is a different thing. Anti-Semitism is real.
Look, the example that Robby gives, Briahna has used a million times just with Black people.
Yes.
She's like, name the laws on the books that are discriminatory against Black people. Well, but there's the names on resumes that
right. Right, yeah. Higher prison populations, all these things that are not.
Exactly.
That's why it's kind of an insane argument that she's making because the entire point. Well, I guess to be fair to Briahna, she's talking specifically about the civil rights legislation, which obviously there were laws directly at that time that were discriminatory against Black people, and that's why I'm in favor of having the laws that say you shouldn't be able to do that.
The example that he gives is for the ADL, all the stuff that they'll trot out. Briahna will trot all those same examples out.
Right. But what I'm saying is, now in the year 2024, whenever you have these conversations where Briahna is on definitely the side of more restrictive policies and more safetyism in terms of fighting against, perceived actions of racism, generally from everything that I've heard about her say, is that yes, now the argument is, well, you don't need to find specific laws that are racist. It's all this systemic racism. It's all institutional racism. It's all unintended consequences, or, it's all resumes. It's all prison populations. It's all these other things. You can't point to any direct law anymore.
Right. Yeah, no. The thing that's just fascinating is when it affects her, it's completely visible.
Yeah, right.
When she's arguing against it, when she thinks someone else is using it in bad faith, like the mask is off.
Right. Exactly.
She's queen detective for DEI.
Yep.
Real. This is not an issue. I'm not agreeing
and
with
they're saying
you.
there should-
I'm not. I want to make it very clear. My critique is not that isn't real discrimination that should be administered to with various policy regimes. My critique is different, which is that there is a foreign state that spends billions and lobbying dollars to make sure that nobody can criticize the relationship between our client state and the United States of America, that has the geopolitical implications that can lead us into World War III. And all I'm saying, Robby, is that the scale and nature of that, it is insulting and frankly incredibly misleading to say that has anything to do with what's going on most of these college campuses. This is so much bigger than that. These speakers at Columbia are protesting because Columbia literally is invested in weapons manufacturers. And do you know why so many colleges are invested in weapons manufacturers? Because it's one of the most profitable sure bet enterprises.
So this is like classic Jonathan Haidian emotional arguing. Okay. So the argument was about something very specific. It was about this idea of, does this proposed anti-Semitism law sort of match DEI laws, and does it have any relationship to, the original civil rights legislation? And sort of, Haidt talks about how, like, very often when you're arguing with people, you start like front loading a bunch of sort of like connected but tenuous emotional claims that are like grievances to sort of like weight the argument, even though it doesn't really have any connection. So she's like, listen, this is, we have to stop World War III, Robby. Okay?
Oh, I know.
Israel is like, they're going to get us into World War III. And look, like, this is about, weapons manufacturing, because weapons are so profitable, even though they kill all these people. Like, this has nothing to do with the original argument whatsoever.
Yeah, I love how she throws in, it's, this is all about a foreign power manipulating America.
Yeah.
As if there are no Jewish people in America that have interests that they want to see our Congress bend to, right?
Of course, right.
Yeah.
Or, is like even I think AIPAC has like raises the largest in terms of membership, pro-Israel super PAC is of evangelical Christians that are American.
Evangelical one. Yes, exactly.
Yes, it's like,
Yes.
I don't know. Yeah, it's the foreign power.
Americans have a dog in this fight as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny that when talking about any other issue, especially people on the left, they'll acknowledge that America is not selfless. America is doing things for self-interested reasons, right?
Of course.
And so, like, obviously, America supporting Israel is for self-interest reasons.
Of course.
There's a tangible benefit that America is getting from supporting Israel. And it's funny when that suddenly drops away and suddenly it's like, no, the evil foreign power is controlling us.
A capitalistic first world democracy in the Middle East. How many are there over there, Sitch?
There's one.
Come on. It's definitely, it's not about Judaism, okay?
Yeah.
Because America decides when wars happen. We puppeteer a whole global system of
Robby is so fed up. Oh, this is great.
That's
Robby's
a thumbnail face for Robby.
Robby's like, here we go. Here we go again. We're off to the races.
This is how like it's annoying when you're arguing with someone trying to get about something specific and they tie it to like there's like in their mind is the corkboard with all the red strings going everywhere. And it's like if you challenge one thing, it's like you're challenging the entire conspiracy laid out in their mind. Don't you know that America starts and controls all the wars in the world? How dare you fight against me?
I know. Oh, this is King Bad Faith. Come on, Briahna. What are you doing?
Pure elephant.
violence because we are the ones that fund the weapons and profit mightily from it. Well, I don't need to sit here and explain the military-industrial complex to you. I know that you get it.
You're going to explain to me things I already understand is the order of the day.
But the point of the matter here is that this is not just DEI.
I don't agree that we are only and always America's fault, that we are the only country capable of acting on the world stage. But
well, that's a straw man, so you can believe that, and I don't have to push back against that because that's obviously not what I said.
Wait. Isn't that what she said? Isn't that what she said?
Good.
Wait, let me go back a second.
And weapons manufacturers. And do you know why so many colleges are invested in weapons manufacturers? Because it's one of the most profitable sure bet enterprises because America decides when wars happen. We puppeteer a whole global system of violence because we are the ones that fund the.
I mean, she didn't technically say everyone, but I mean, it's kind of pretty strongly implied in this statement.
We puppeteer an entire global system of violence. I mean,
yeah. I mean, I don't.
That's everyone, right?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like
else?
much of a straw man. I don't know.
Weapons and profit mightily from it. Well, I don't need to sit here and explain the military-industrial complex to you. I know that you get it.
You're going to explain to me things I already understand is the order of the day.
But the point of the matter here is that this is not just DEI.
I don't agree that we are only and always America's fault, that we are the only country capable of acting on the world stage. But
well, that's a straw man, so you can believe that, and I don't have to push back against that.
She said puppeteer. She literally said puppeteer.
Yeah, but she's going to focus on like, well, I didn't say only. There's other countries that do it too. Even though she's like, through her, the way she said it's strongly implying that America either is the primary actor or the only actor. So it's not strong.
Right,
But
there's
it's also
other
funny.
Puppeteers out there? Come on,
Right.
Sitch. Who?
I don't know. China. But
Right.
yeah, that'd be a good question. But also, it is ironic that she's like, I'm not. This is straw man. When like she's been straw manning the crap out of Robby this whole segment. So
Oh, of course.
That's obviously not what I said. The thing that people should be focused on. So many people are trying. The right. So many conservatives are trying to derail people from having natural sympathy, frankly, for these protests. Most people look at a 50-year-old woman being wrestled to the ground, saying, "Please don't hit my head on the concrete," as a complete and total overreach. But you have to start asking yourself the question: why is the state reacting in this way? Why is there such kind of coordinated pushback against students standing on their campus saying, please don't do violence, please don't do war? Why is it that
this is so stupid? This is so insanely bad faith. This is the conspiracy corkboard in her brain. Okay, there's no coordinated magical conspiracy here. Why is it? This isn't very difficult, Briahna. Why is it that when you have a bunch of college kids who are disrupting colleges by protesting in places that they're not supposed to protest, by putting a bunch of tents up in the middle of campus, which they're not supposed to do, why is that disruptive to colleges? And why would they say, listen, we're in favor of people being able to protest, but like not this way? And when the people say, no, F you, we should be able to protest wherever you want. Well, what are they supposed to do? They're just supposed to twiddle their thumbs and say, well, I guess you just get to do whatever you want on private property forever, indefinitely.
Yeah, they told them, man. They gotta shut up.
Yes, it's not a conspiracy. This is not a conspiracy, Briahna. Okay, the evil Israeli lobby is not manipulating and puppeteering all the college campuses.
Yeah.
Which, if they were, like, explain this to, like, riddle me this, Briahna. If that was the case, if it was all the conspiracy, behind the scenes, why would any of colleges allow this to get to the point that it's gotten already? Why would they not have cracked down on this on day one?
Yeah.
Why would they allow so many professors, which we even talked about on this show? There's so many professors in these colleges that are like not only like American, anti-West, but are like virulently anti-Israel, and we're cheering on the Hamas attacks. And these people are still professors at these colleges. And yet I'm supposed to believe there's some kind of magic conspiracy going on behind the scenes that Israel's controlling things, or the pro-Israeli lobby's controlling things.
It's not very good puppeteering, right? AIPAC should just drop a list off at the colleges and say, here's who we want fired.
Yes. Where's all the manufactured consent, the pro-Israeli manufactured consent? I don't see it. It seems like to be entirely the other direction.
That Bill Ackman and people are switching political parties and switching sides. Bill Ackman just came out saying he doesn't want to support Joe Biden. Oh, okay. So what is really motivating your politics here? I thought you're a Democrat. I would think you would care about abortion and all of these substantive issues that Democrats, no matter how much you don't like Joe Biden, care about. But suddenly, this one thing is willing to motivate you to completely switch sides.
Well,
what
here's
is
a different
going
view
on
of the
here?
conflict than the protesters and the Joe.
What's another thing too is like it annoys me when people do this. They like, so what's just this one thing about Israel and the Palestinian thing? When it's obviously, if you've like spent 2 seconds listening to any of these kids speaking or anything, these people generally don't have isolated beliefs. They have a constellation of beliefs. And when you know what a couple of them are, you can generally, because people are
Oh,
tribal
please
sheep.
don't. No, don't. Please, no.
You don't like the constellation of belief thing?
I don't like it because it's basically a stereotype. You're using a shortcut to say. And look, I do think
Well,
a
no,
lot
no,
of
no, no,
people
no, no, no.
fall
I'm not
into
using a
that,
stereotype. What I'm saying is the kids that are on these encampments, okay,
right.
you're not going to find conservatives there generally, right? You might find one, right? You're not going to find super individually rights-oriented liberals on these encampments, right?
No, you're going to find cult members. You're going to
Right,
find
but
NPCs.
you're going to find NPC cult members who generally believe in some form of hyper woke intersectional Marxism and revolution against the West, which is
right.
what
They
you
hate
hear.
colonialism. They hate
Yes.
colonists. Yes.
They hate America. They
Yeah.
hate capitalism,
Yes.
all this stuff, right? They believe in CRT and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
They buy into this whole package of views with this one view. Okay. The people that are at these encampments, they were not motivated just purely by the Palestinian thing. They bought into a whole series of views first to get to that encampment. And so
Of
when you have people
course.
like Bill Ackman and other people that are like, I don't know if I'm going to vote for Joe, I'm going to not vote for Joe Biden because of this or whatever. It's not because of Israel and Palestine. Well, I don't know who Bill Ackman is, but for most people, it's not about this one issue. It's about this whole series of intersectional anti-liberal Marxist belief system that is seeming to come up, and the left doesn't want to do anything about it, doesn't want to actually stop it.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, all I'm trying to point out is that there are these really big, high-level issues that completely, from the history of the founding of this country, the idea that these small interpersonal, racial, ethnic differences have been used to prevent masses of working-class people who know what's right and what's wrong from allying with each other and going after true power centers in the United States of America. And
Oh, the irony, Sitch. I can't take it. I can't take the irony here.
Yeah.
People have been the powers that be have been using race to divide us so that we can't unite around class issues. What? Can you say CRT, Sitch?
I know, it's so hilarious.
It's so baffling.
Nope.
And the reason that I push back against some of the DEI characterizations is because they're being used the same way that the existence of black people was used to shut down almost all of the public swimming pools in the United States of America, was used to make sure that we didn't get Medicare for all because people didn't want black people to be having the program, was used to prevent us from having any number of social programs, including school funding, because it's the feeling, so all these social welfare programs are going to be going to an undeserving poor that gets racialized in a way that makes white people feel safe, that it's never going to be excluded from them. And I feel like DEI is going in that direction, and I'm concerned about that being used to divide solidarity in this moment.
I recognize you getting. I understand, but I'm not criticizing. Obviously there is racism and there's anti-Semitism. What we're criticizing is a set of policies that seem, or I am at least, that seem increasingly ridiculous, are not improving matters for the marginalized community that is applied to by the policy. That, we're talking about the kind of, what was that case we had where the ACLU is under labor investigation because they used a DEI policy to fire an Asian woman who thought the boss was not good because he had used, and then it was racially coded that they fight. Like, it's this kind of ridiculous workplace nonsense that these places got themselves into because of DEI.
That. But is this a workplace issue? Is a Congress member aligning with the ADL to put censorship trackers, anti-Semitism trackers at university, a workplace issue?
It's the same kind of well-intended, but obviously going to result in greater harm and greater threats to free speech and just diversity of thought and all that.
It's a different kind of thing. That's my objection, and we can differ on that.
So you think if there was a situation where, I don't know, like a bunch of right-wing college students started, you know, holding themselves up in buildings, putting out tents or whatever, saying that they wanted to start fighting against wokeness. They wanted to fight against all the anti-white racism in the country, right? And like they weren't even being racist. They were just saying we want to fight against wokeness and the anti-white racism in the country and all this stuff, right? You and I know, and everyone listening knows that this would get very quickly categorized as all these guys are white nationalists and racist, right?
Of course, yeah.
And there would be calls for, and if the campuses, if the college campuses allow, even if actually we don't even need to go that far. If you literally just had a bunch of pro-Trump people that were, making encampments on these college campuses because they feel like the election was stolen or something, right? They would all be it'd all be cast as racism and all this stuff.
White
and
supremacy.
Right, and white supremacy and Charlottesville 2.0 and all this stuff. And if the colleges weren't doing anything about it, that there would be, people like and Democrats in Congress saying that we need to put some kind of, the college campuses are not doing enough to fight against racism. We need to put these racism monitors into the college campuses, blah, 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 blah. And I would be highly skeptical that Briahna would be sitting here saying that it's a stupid, terrible idea.
No, she'd be for it 100%.
Yes, that's what I think. And it's hilarious that she criticizes like they're using race to cloud the issue away from class issues. And that's literally like what wokeness is at its most core level.
That's why using race. It's so ironic.
Yes. Wokeness is literally using race to pull away from class issues. And it's just like she can't see it.
Yeah, using race to divide people. But no, she thinks the shadowy elite is doing that, using race to divide people.
Right.
Ooh.
But to me, it's a radically different kind of thing. To critique the thing, but everything isn't DEI. Everything isn't, what was the one before that? Woke. Like, come on. Like, it starts to seem so unserious, and it doesn't preserve your ability to make valid criticisms about DEI. That case, that Matt Brunig segment that we did, I think is absolutely right. The ridiculousness of that one form that went around.
I understand not using, when they use critical race theory.
That's not critical race theory.
When they use critical race theory. Yeah, but with I think DEI is a better catch-all terms for the thing we're describing here.
Well, in this case,
does in fact relate.
This isn't even a workplace issue, right? The
fact that she hangs up on this workplace issue is just ridiculous. Like, what is a college campus if it's not a workplace?
Yeah, well, it's irrelevant. That's why she's hanging up on it too.
Anti-Semitism, whatever watch group that Richie Torres and the ADL are linking up to privately fund.
Well, yeah, but it's in response to things going on in campuses. I mean, it's all right. It's
that's all
DEI in the educational environment rather than the workplace. I mean, that's not. I don't think that's so dissimilar, but that's our debate on the subject. More rising right after this.
Wow.
It's funny because she's like, no, you don't have to make everything about DEI. It's not related. It's like, well, if you were actually listening or understood what he was saying, reason he went to that is because he's drawing a line based on what he believes or what his principles are about why this is wrong. He's saying this is wrong because I'm following a principled position that stems back from A to B to C. And she, like, which you can disagree with, but you should address it instead of just blowing up and, calling him a racist essentially and all this kind of nonsense mudslinging that Briahna is engaged in.
That's such an easy move, though. I mean, that is a chief complaint about the DEI stuff.
Right.
It's just so much easier to blame racism. Your movie failed? Oh, it was racism.
Right.
You did a bad job at work? Oh, it was racism, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
There was a horrific accident and people died? Oh, racism. It's just that's the problem of DEI.
Yep.
Hi, you just listened to a Sitch and Adam recorded video. That's right, we're still doing recorded videos. And of course, we're still doing our live streams. Our Sunday live stream begins at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And our daily live streams start at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Come check it out. You're going to love it. Subscribe to this channel right here to watch the live show or watch more of our awesome deep dive videos.